Innovation is key to every single institution out there, whether you're a company, whether you're a soccer team, whether you are a sole trader. It doesn't matter really what role you're playing. You know that you need to be at the forefront. You need to be engaged with the materials at hand. And one of the ways we show that is by continuing to innovate. It's a natural instinct that all of us humans have, whether it's, poking a stick through a hole in a tree to get some bugs out, or flying a spaceship to the moon in order to discover whether or not it is indeed made of cheese. We are curious beings and we love to experiment. So how do we make sure our teams are innovative? And how do we know where the problems are in our innovation process? Is it our teamwork? Is it our leadership? Or is it our approach as a company that is holding back some of our innovation? This is one of the simplest equations you can use to establish whether or not your team is innovative and where the problems are. And this works across the board from tiny little teams of 2 all the way up to teams of several thousand. This equation is so simple, no matter where you are in your company, you can apply this.
Welcome to Culture Codex, where we help companies become thriving communities that are resilient, healthy, and ready to achieve great results.
All right, so I'm going to show you this equation, and it is going to be so simple, it's going to blow your minds. The first thing we need to know is how many people are we talking about? It's really simple. Do we know the number of team members we're talking about? Now, this is very simple. We only want to keep it simple. So don't go saying, right, we're looking at the whole team across multiple levels of an industry, people in different countries. No, this is a ratio that applies to each group. So maybe 5, 6 people, maybe up to 20 or 50. But really, you can then apply this ratio as it grows up. You can see how all these little ratios will affect the whole, but you want to be able to isolate who's working, who's not. So start with groups about maybe 20, 25 would be a good number to really be looking at, depending on how big your organization is. Once you've understood how many team members you've got, the next thing you need to know is how many ideas they're suggesting. Now, depending on what sort of work you're doing, you might want this to be more frequent as a metric. I suggest that it should be done weekly or monthly. Some industries or some teams, it might be a daily or even hourly suggestion. What we learn from this digit is how comfortable our employees are, how much they're trusted by their leadership, and whether or not that is really building good, strong communication. So if you aren't seeing a ratio here of about 3 times the amount of employees, you know that this number is off. That's a good number to be aiming for, about 3 times what you've currently got in the space of a week or a month. I definitely opt for a monthly metric of doing that. And the reason you can tell this is that in order for people to suggest an idea, especially one that's from out of the sequence of what you're currently doing, they have to be able to trust their leaders. They've got to trust their team isn't going to make fun of them. And in order to be innovative, in all the studies of great teams with fast, adaptable innovation, one of the magical elements is that people are able to bring things from outside their world and into the business. So whether that's they've learned something, kayaking or climbing mountains, that they can then apply as a philosophy into whatever sales management, you wouldn't necessarily have thought about it, but it's because they're able to make those connections and feel safe in suggesting them. So this is really important, this ratio here. It should be about 3 times that. The second part of this ratio is how many ideas get implemented. Now, I'm not saying that we should implement every idea, because some ideas we can scrap fairly fast. It's great that they're being brainstormed, but it might be totally inappropriate. It might just be an offshot as an idea. But we also need to know that your leadership team is actually empowering people. If they're suggesting ideas and you've got lots of those, but nothing is being reasonably implemented or taken to the next stage of implementation. That doesn't mean that everything has to go through, because as I said before, there are lots and lots of suggestions that just won't work. But there should be a reasonable ratio, almost on par with the amount of members in your team that are going through regularly, because it says that, you know, there's lots of suggestions, but here are some of the things that we are trying. And what's really important about this is that when you implement these things, it's not that you are implementing an idea and it has to remain forever. It's that you are very crystal clear into what the criteria is to make that suggestion a good one in its implementation. So it's a test. And so the communication back to the team members is, we're going to try it. If it reaches these metrics, if it reaches these KPIs that we need, then we might keep it. But we're going to reevaluate it at this point and see how it works. Because what that's doing is saying, we've seen your suggestion, we trust that it is valid for some reason, whatever reason it is, and we are not going to blindly trust you. We're going to say, this is what we're trying to accomplish. This is the point we're going to be looking at whether or not it has been a successful trial, or whether we need to go back and evaluate. You might even find that you are running 2 or 3 trials of something at once. Maybe if we're talking about shop managers, I know that not all of you are in retail, but it's a nice, easy model to work with. If we were talking about shop managers, maybe it's about putting all the soaps at the front of the store, and that works. You say, right, we'll trial that in 3 stores. Someone else suggests, okay, we're going to put all the hand creams next to the nail care, and you trial that in the second set of stores. So you might have multiple things being trialed at once, and it might be that all you're trying to do is simply improve your upsales, but all these suggestions might be worth trialing. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to accept one idea and not trial others. And that means that you can then say, at that pivotal point when you've said you're going to reevaluate, you can sit down and say, here are the metrics. Here is what's successful. Here is what's not successful. Why is it successful? And then you can either say, yeah, this is a process we want to continue to just maintain until we see a reason to reevaluate again. Or you can go back to the drawing board, talk to your team, come back to these suggestions. So probably something I didn't mention before is that these should be free-flowing ideas. They should be suggestions in passing, not necessarily demanded at the start of a meeting. You can request, yes, this is our mission. Anyone with suggestions, please come forward. But this equation is designed for free-flowing thought. So someone who automatically is saying, I feel safe enough to make a suggestion, and I feel empowered enough that we can try it. And so it's really not about those decisions that need to be made as a team, where someone is at the front of a meeting saying, right, let's brainstorm this now. These should be ideas suggested throughout the time, whether it's on the floor, at a later date, an email sent 2 days later as they've chewed on the ideas and actually got them to the point where they think they have a solution. This equation, as I said, works for teams across the board. So no matter how big your organization is, you can start applying this. If this number here is not very high, if you're finding that's low, you have an issue with your trust, your teamwork, and your leadership. So you need to go back, you need to talk to your leaders. What is wrong? Don't talk just to your leaders. In order to work out what is working in a team, you need to speak to all of the team. Find out whether there's someone in there that is making them feel particularly under threat. Often that happens in teams. Find out if there's processes in the way. This one here is almost always about process. There's too much red tape to try something. There isn't enough freedom for the leader of that team to say, yes, they can go ahead. So this one here is definitely about whether or not there's an issue within team dynamics and the people. And this one here, if this is low, check your processes. Check that your team has enough authority to go and make those changes, trial things, and come back to you saying, hey, we have success on this. Let's try it on a larger scale. Because in the end, that is what we want. We want people to be trying things on small scales before we roll them out across the board and say, this is our strategy. This is the basic innovation equation. Go ahead, take this away. As I said, it works across the board for any team size. Come back to me if you do have questions. We have far more complex KPIs we can apply, but if you want something simple and effective and absolutely based in reality, this right here, this is your baby. So what you're aiming for is 3 times the amount of ideas suggested to the team members, and you want usually about on par with the amount of people. So basically 1/3 of those ideas should be trialed. It has been a pleasure to talk to you. Come back at me if you do have questions. I'm very happy to answer them, and I wish you a wonderful day. Welcome to Culture Codex, where we help you put the humanity back in your company.